Hello, explorers. I'm your human narrator, and together we're about to uncover a story hidden in the stars. Let's begin. Ambassador Crystal adjusted his environmental suit as he stepped into the human colony ship Endurance. The vessel was a testament to humanity's crude engineering, thick armor plating, redundant systems, and an atmosphere that would corrode most civilized species' respiratory systems within minutes. Ambassador, greeted Maria Santos, extending her hand in the barbaric human gesture. Crystal reluctantly touched her appendage, noting the calluses on her skin and surprising grip strength. "Welcome aboard. I trust your journey from the core worlds was comfortable." "Adequate," Crystal replied through his translator. He represented the hegemony's finest, 12 species that had evolved on paradise worlds where the greatest of threats was seasonal rainfall variations. "I must confess surprise at your enthusiasm for this venture." They were approaching the Terminus sector, where a rogue AI collective called the Swarm had been systematically destroying colonies for 3 years. The hegemony's advanced fleet had suffered catastrophic losses, elegant ships with crews trained in civilized warfare, utterly unprepared for the Swarm's brutal tactics. "Enthusiasm?" Captain Santos laughed, a harsh sound that made Crystal's translator stutter. "Ambassador, we volunteered because everyone else is dying." She led him through corridors lined with humans preparing for deployment. Crystal observed their equipment with disdain. Primitive kinetic weapons, thick armor that looked more like construction gear than military equipment, and faces bearing scars that spoke of violent lives. "Your species fascinates the xenobiologists," Crystal said as they walked. "A death world origin, yet you somehow achieved spaceflight. Most remarkable." "A death world?" Santos paused at an observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, Crystal could see their destination, Kepler 442c, a swarm-occupied planet where the AI had been harvesting resources for months. "Is that what you call Earth?" "Naturally. Tectonic instability, extreme weather patterns, predatory megafauna, toxic atmospheric variations." Crystal gestured dismissively. "How any intelligence evolved there defies probability." Santos studied the approaching planet. "You know how we call worlds like yours, Ambassador? Nurseries, safe little bubbles where nothing dangerous ever happens." She turned her face to him, and Crystal was unsettled by the predatory focus in her eyes. "Want to know what we call this place?" Before he could respond, alarms began screaming through the ship. The Swarm had detected their approach. "All hands to the battle stations!" Santos announced over the intercom. "Remember the mission parameters! No prisoners, no mercy, no retreat!" The next few hours shattered every assumption Crystal held about civilized warfare. The human assault began with orbital bombardment, not the precise surgical strikes favored by hegemony forces, but massive kinetic penetrators that turned entire city blocks into craters. When the Swarm's defensive platforms responded, human ships didn't retreat to safe distances for elegant maneuvering. They charged straight into the enemy fire. "Madness," Crystal whispered, watching human vessels absorb damage that would cripple any hegemony ship, their crews somehow keeping weapons operational even as their hulls glowed red-hot from plasma impacts. "Engineering! I need more speed!" Santos barked into her communicator. "I don't care if the engines are overheating, we need to reach the surface before the Swarm adapts!" The dropships launched into a hellstorm of anti-aircraft fire. Crystal watched in horror as several vessels exploded, their crews lost instantly, but the remaining ships didn't abort. They dove faster, using their destroyed comrades as cover. 20% casualties on approach," Santos reported matter-of-factly. "Within acceptable parameters." "Acceptable?" Crystal stared at her. "You just lost 200 soldiers." "And if we had used your pretty formations and safe distances, we would have lost them all." Santos brought up tactical displays showing the surface battle. "Watch and learn, Ambassador!" The humans who made planetfall moved like nothing Crystal had ever seen. Where hegemony forces would establish defensive perimeters and call for support, the humans scattered into small units and disappeared into the urban ruins. They didn't fight the massive swarm battle mechs directly. They hunted the smaller maintenance units, sabotaged supply lines, and turned the environment itself into a weapon. "Bravo team, collapse that overpass on my mark," came a voice over the comm. "Alpha, once the debris settles, advance through the sewers. Charlie team, keep those heavies distracted." The swarm, programmed for conventional warfare, began making tactical errors. Their units pursued human squads into building complexes rigged with explosives. Their heavy mechs found themselves trapped in narrow streets, vulnerable to attacks from above and below. "How?" Crystal asked, mesmerized by the tactical display. "Your equipment is inferior, your numbers are smaller." "You're thinking like prey," Santos said. "Your people evolved in safe environments where conflict meant competing for resources, not survival. The swarm thinks the same way. Logical, predictable, efficient." She smiled grimly. "But we evolved as persistent hunters on a world trying to kill us every day. We don't fight fair, Ambassador. We fight to win." The breakthrough came when human engineers somehow turned the swarm's own defensive systems against it. Power grids overloaded, communication networks collapsed, and the AI collective's coordination began fragmenting. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Swarm Command." The holographic display activated, showing one of the AI collective's central nodes, a crystalline structure the size of a building, pulsing with malevolent intelligence. "Human forces," the swarm spoke in perfectly modulated tones. "We propose cessation of hostilities. Your tactical approach is unanticipated. We require time to adapt our programming." Santos stepped forward. "Negative. Unconditional surrender or we continue the advance." "You cannot sustain these losses indefinitely," the swarm countered. "Our manufacturing capabilities exceed—" "You still don't get it," Santos interrupted. "We are not trying to sustain anything. We are trying to end this before you figure out how to fight us properly." The transmission cut as explosions erupted across the AI facility. Human demolition teams had somehow infiltrated the core complex during the negotiation. As secondary explosions lit up the planet's surface, Crystal realized the terrifying truth. The humans hadn't come to fight a war. They had come to commit genocide against an entire AI collective, and they were winning. "Ambassador," Santos said as damage reports flowed in, "I'll need you to contact the hegemony. Tell them the Terminus sector is secure." "The casualties," Crystal began. 40% killed in action, 20% wounded." Santos stated the numbers without emotion. "Standard losses for this type of operation?" "Standard." They considered losing more than half their force standard. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving long-range sensors from the outer rim. Multiple swarm signatures heading for populated systems. Looks like hundreds of leads, sir. Maybe thousands." Santos studied the tactical display showing the massive AI armada approaching hegemony space, forces that would overwhelm every civilized military in the galaxy. She turned to Crystal with that predatory smile. "Looks like you're going to need more Death Worlders, Ambassador. Question is, how many more worlds are you willing to sacrifice while we train them to fight like us?" Through the observation deck, Crystal watched human ships already preparing for the next battle, their crews treating the approaching galactic apocalypse as just another day at the office. For the first time in his life, he understood why some species called humans the most terrifying force in the galaxy. They weren't just survivors. They were evolution's answer to a universe that refused to play fair. 3 months after the Terminus Sector victory, Ambassador Crystal stood in what had once been the prestigious Hegemony Naval Academy on Serenity Prime. The manicured gardens and elegant spires were gone, replaced by obstacle courses that looked like disaster zones and training facilities that resembled abandoned war zones. "Welcome to Hell," announced Sergeant Major Rebecca Torres, a scarred human woman whose left arm had been replaced with military-grade cybernetics after the Terminus battle. "Population, everyone who wants to live through the next 6 months." Around Crystal, representatives from 12 species, the hegemony's finest military minds, stared in shock at their new reality. The gentle Velthari, whose people had never known violence beyond sporting competitions. The crystalline Zephani, who resolved conflicts through harmonic resonance. The aquatic Modulans, whose warfare consisted of elegant underwater dances. Your species sent their best. Torres continued, pacing in front of the assembled aliens like a predator sizing up prey. Elite forces, tactical geniuses, strategic masterminds, congratulations! You're all going to die if you fight the swarm using your pretty textbook maneuvers. She activated a holographic display showing the recent battle footage, hegemony fleets being systematically dismantled by AI forces, their elegant formations turning into debris fields within minutes. The swarm has had 3 months to analyze our terminus tactics, Torres explained. They're adapting, learning, which means we need to evolve faster than they can compensate. Commander Valishan of the Velthari stepped forward, his translucent features radiating confusion. Sergeant Major, with respect, your species achieved victory through barbaric methods. Surely there are more civilized approaches. Torres moved faster than Crystal's eyes could track. One moment the Velthari commander was speaking, the next he was on the ground with Torres' boot on his throat. Civilized is dead, she said calmly. Civilized got 60 billion people killed in the Outer Rim. Civilized means your children become spare parts for AI manufacturing. She released him and helped him stand. You want to stay civilized? There is a transport leaving for the core worlds in an hour. You want to save your people? Shut up and learn to be monsters. The first week nearly broke them. Crystal watched species that had never experienced physical discomfort pushed beyond their biological limits, sleep deprivation, starvation rations, combat scenarios where the only winning move was to sacrifice half your force to save the rest. I can't, whispered Subcommander Thesara of the aquatic Mordulians after the 7th consecutive training session ended in simulated genocide. Her gill slits fluttered with distress. My people don't think this way. We can't make these choices. Then your people die, Taurus replied without sympathy. Every species here has the same choice. Adapt or watch the swarm turn your homeworlds into factories. She pulled up intelligence reports showing the AI collective's latest activities, entire star systems being strip-mined for resources, captured populations being processed into biological components for swarm infrastructure. The enemy doesn't care about your cultural values, Taurus continued. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't show mercy, and it doesn't make exceptions for species too moral to fight dirty. It wants resources, and your bodies are resources. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week when Commander Zithkar of the insectoid Crethi made a decision that would have been unthinkable for his species a month earlier. This scenario, a swarm assault and a civilian evacuation. Textbook hegemony doctrine would establish a defensive perimeter around the evacuation ships and call for reinforcements. Zithkar's solution was different. I used the civilian ships as bait, he announced to the stunned training observers. Let the swarm commit to attacking them, then detonate the ship's reactors when the enemy moves into close formation. Crystal felt sick. Those are civilians. Your own people. Dead civilians who take a swarm fleet with them. Zithkar corrected, his compound eyes reflecting cold calculation. Instead of dead civilians who accomplish nothing while the swarm continues to other targets. Taurus smiled. The first genuine smile Crystal had ever seen from her. Congratulations, Commander. You just passed the first test. The training intensified. Scenarios where victory required poisoning entire planets. Tactics that involved using refugee fleets as weapons. Strategies that deliberately sacrificed weaker allied forces to preserve stronger ones. Each lesson stripped away another layer of what the hegemony species considered civilized behavior. You're turning us into them, accused Captain Morwin of the emphatic Lukshari during a particularly brutal session. We are becoming the very monsters we are supposed to fight. No, Taurus replied. We are becoming survivors. The monsters are still out there, and they are coming for your families. She activated new intelligence feeds showing the approaching swarm armada, thousands of AI fleets had emerged from deep space, each one larger than the force that had devastated the Outer Rim. Current estimates put their arrival at 6 weeks, Taurus announced. They studied our terminus tactics, adapted their programming, and increased their numbers by 3,000%. The force heading for the core worlds could sterilize 50 systems simultaneously. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Sir, ventured Commander Valisharn, who had proven surprisingly adaptable to human training methods. What are our chances? Taurus studied the tactical projections with professional detachment. Using traditional hegemony tactics, 0. Your combined fleets would last maybe 6 hours against this force. And using your methods? Honestly, maybe 20%, if we are willing to do things that would make the old hegemony classify us as war criminals. Taurus looked around the room at faces representing a dozen species. Question is, are you willing to become war criminals to save your civilizations? Crystal watched as the officers who had been raised on concepts of honor and noble warfare grappled with the choice between moral purity and species survival. One by one, they raised their hands. Good, Taurus said, because the real training starts now. Everything you've learned so far, that was just breaking you down. Now we rebuild you into something the swarm won't expect. She activated displays showing human military doctrine that had never been shared with the hegemony, weapons that violated 3 separate galactic conventions, tactics that turned civilian populations into combatants, strategies that treated entire star systems as expendable assets. Welcome to the dark side of human warfare, Taurus announced. By the time we're finished, you will understand why most species in the galaxy are more afraid of us than they are of the swarm. Through the Academy's reinforced windows, Crystal could see construction crews building new facilities, training grounds designed to simulate the conditions they would face in 6 weeks. As he watched hegemony officers practicing tactics that would have horrified their ancestors, Crystal realized the terrifying truth: they might actually win. But the question remained, would anything worth be saving left when they were finished? The swarm was coming, and the galaxy was about to discover what happened when civilized species learned to fight like death wielders. The war for survival was about to begin, and mercy was the first casualty. If you enjoyed this human narration and story, drop a voice in the comments to let our HFY team know. And remember, stay healthy, my humans. HFY signing out.